and Larry.
Thank you, Mr. Goring. I wrote down 2 words, and thank you, all of you, for your presentation. It's bad and it's unprecedented. So it's a very serious situation. I know your report really reflected on areas that's, I guess, basically north, not necessarily Southern California. And I do come from Southern California, but I represent everyone.
Welcome.
But just some comments. I mean, I think that the mic is off. Okay, is that better?
Better.
Okay, thank you. Again, thank you for your report. And as I said, most of it had to do, if not all of it, with Northern California. And fortunately, in Southern California, we're a lot better off because, you know, we have invested millions of dollars in programs and projects that really have conserved water. I mean, I come from an agency, West Basin, and I love to talk about West Basin because I think we're doing some great things there with our water recycling plant. A couple of years ago, I think we reached 1 billion gallons of recycled water. I mean, that was a great thing because it really replaces the imported water. And we're looking at other things. We've done a great job of conservation. Even Metropolitan, through its member agencies, have made a lot of investments. But you mentioned some of the private purveyors like Golden State Water Company, you know, talking to them about coming up with some kind of partnership solutions and so forth. Do you have any suggestions or any ideas what that may be?
Am I still on? Can you hear me? Yeah. I think in the near term, it's the kinds of things we talked about. It's tapping into a neighbor's water system to help your system in a time of need. And we're seeing that in several places in the region. Over the long term, the kind of cooperative programs that we've seen between water companies and water districts, a good example of that is 3 years ago, the Water Forum facilitated a 3-way negotiation between the City of Sacramento, Cal American Water Company, and our local environmental caucus, which is made up of 4 environmental groups. Cal American Water had several wells that were being put out of commission because of contaminated groundwater, contaminated plume from the Aerojet facility. And they had no additional groundwater to turn to. So they went to the City of Sacramento and asked if they could purchase wholesale water from Sacramento. The city knew that would have some environmental concerns because extracting more surface water from the river would be a real red flag for environmental community. So we sat down in a 3-way negotiation. We found a solution that worked for all 3 parties. And, I can't tell you what the secret to that is. I can tell you that part of it is the fact that those 3 entities have been sitting down and talking about water issues and water policies together for over a decade. They had long-term relationships. Our environmental representatives have an amazing ability to look for practical solutions that actually work, and our public agencies like the City of Sacramento also have an amazing capacity, frankly, to care about the environmental resource, and so I think that has a lot to do with it.
Bill Croyle, the State Drought Task Force leader, is with us. Bill, we've got 2 more questions in the queue, and then we'll go to you for a few comments. We've received very thorough reports from the State Water Board, Water Master, Bureau of Reclamation, and the Forum. So,
can I just follow up with what I was saying to him, just briefly? It's good to hear that there are other kinds of things that people are doing together. And I know I make comments about Southern California, but I think we should look at this drought as a drought for the state, not for Southern California, Northern California, Central. And I think that message, really people should really think about that, coming up with solutions for the state. And I think that's why this plan, the Delta Plan, is very critical in terms of when we look at water liability statewide. So I just want to say that we're really all in this together.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Phil?
Mr. Wilson, you indicated the governor's executive order allows the board to issue or revise, I think you call them temporary emergency change orders.
Temporary urgency change orders.
Okay. Is that for the purpose of protecting human use of water, or is it for environmental purposes, or both?
It really is for both. There are certain findings that the board has to make before issuing a temporary urgency change order. And first, obviously, there is an urgency for the change requested, but you also have to make findings that other legal uses of water are protected, and that there's not an unreasonable impact on the environment, and overall that the proposed change is in the public interest. So it's a balancing act. As I said in my remarks, we expect to receive a petition from the projects requesting modifications of water quality control standards, probably most particularly the delta outflow standard, and we'll just have to go through that and balance the various factors, what various outflow scenarios mean to the rest of the state and possible curtailments of people north of the delta, how much the Bureau and the department will still be obligated to at least contribute some flows toward that center. There's just a lot of variables.
And from that statement, which I understand, it is clear that the board retains what we would call a co-equal goal authority, that is the balancing of interests that comes from the need for water reliability as well as an improved environment. I understand there are different statutory authority and constitutional authority for the board that exist. Are you relatively satisfied that the board retains its authority? It's given greater discretion on certain things, but they still do the balancing test.
Absolutely, they still do the balancing test. These temporary urgency change petitions, if acted upon, do not create vested rights. They're temporary in nature and are also subject to reopening. They only are of limited duration, and they could even be written in a way where they could have a range of actions taking place over the life of the changed order itself.
In your comments, you also said that dry years or severely dry years increase the possibility that the board will be investigating the notion of unreasonable uses of water as well as wasting of water, the constitutional provisions. What early signs have you gotten? I understand you're not speaking directly for the board, but only in your role as water master. But what steps are the boards taking to flag that issue, the constitutional requirements?
Yeah, a couple of things. I believe whatever curtailment notices we do end up issuing, we've already issued.
You sent out the general letter.
We sent out a general letter to virtually all diverters that they could possibly be subject to curtailments later in the year. To the extent that curtailment letters are issued, they no doubt will have some provisions dealing with some of the constitutional principles you've articulated. And to implement that, we were hoping to have a field presence to make sure that there's an even playing field. And as inspectors may be looking at whether the curtailment orders are being complied with, we also will be looking at things like the example I said. If there's flood irrigation in certain areas where water is just so source, is that really a reasonable method of diversion in these times? So the two main things would be the curtailment notice and what it would contain, and the field presence to check for compliance.
Is the board process restricted to reviews of existing water uses, water permits with petitions before the board, or pending, or decisions granted, or do you have authority to? Does the board have authority to issue more generic standards that might apply on a statewide basis?
I think that the board always had the ability, I think on its own motion to make, changes to various standards and permits. If you're outside of the realm of the temporary urgency change petition, that there's more process involved, and we might not be able to be as nimble. So I believe that the main vehicle that would be used to try to balance all of these various concerns would be that the two things I've mentioned, the acting upon a request from the projects for temporary urgency change and then balancing all of the needs and conditions there, and also dealing with these curtailment provisions.
Are you, is the board concerned in your judgment about the fact that the wide diversity and use of water throughout California for all purposes makes it quite difficult to judge how much people are using, whether there's any flexibility, how and where, as opposed to other approaches that have been suggested, for example, advising parties that the target goal for residential use of water is the statewide average or lower. I mean, you understand the administrative problems better than anybody in that, and we tend to get lost in details so fast on this that the goal that's left out there is unclear and constantly shifting.
Yeah, maybe an example, if the board is entertaining a temporary urgency change petition, which could possibly result in a less flow going out through the delta, that obviously will have some salinity impacts in the delta itself, and we have to balance some of those needs and what can be done about it. And there are some specific things that we're trying to look at, not just generalities. I know, again, a report I filed with the Stewardship Council last year dealing with gates and barriers. There are some possibilities of using both existing gates and dealing with possible new barriers, temporary barriers that could increase circulation, somehow try to mitigate some of the water quality effects that reduced outflows and through the delta would present. So we're trying to go beyond the realm of just having just general orders and edicts coming out and getting into specific things that might have some real world impact.
Thank you.
Larry?
Thank you. There are those that would say that chickens are coming home to roost. And I couldn't agree more with Gloria. Southern California has done a much better job at preparing for this than we in Northern California. And that's because we had the water. We didn't have to worry. Well, the folks in Australia had to worry after about a 10-year drought, dried up the rivers, dried up complete water in towns. And it was catastrophic for not only their economy, but for their environment, everything. And we just need to grasp this and not, when it clouds up and we get the rain, which will come, and there possibly the floods that go with it, if we let this pass like we have done every time in the past, then we deserve whatever we get. So that's obviously not a question, but it's a rant. It's we sit here and we've had untold amount of former drought studies. We've been told what we need to do. We need regional self-sufficiency. We need to basically have as many possible ways of dealing with it, whether it be surface water, groundwater, desal, reuse, reallocation, all of the different things. What have we done? Southern California was forced into doing it because of where they are at the end of the spigot. But because we have huge rivers that go rolling by our doors, well, the pictures of the American don't look too good, and the ones I've seen of 76 and 77 looked like on the Consumnes and the McCollum, they were dry. So all I can say is we're going to get through this. There are going to be those that suffer because of the fact they don't have alternatives, and we need, in Northern California, to realize it and then put our money where our mouth is. I don't know how you do the two equal goals. I don't know how you do that if you don't have any water. Because at one point they will say, we're going to give water to the people and not the fish.